the Springboks, back-to-back world champions, back-to-back Rugby Championship winners.
Right, so look, I've had been busy since obviously I did that video just the day after the All Blacks concluded the Rugby Championship of 2025 with that win in Perth against the Wallabies. And I sort of said, look, I wasn't going to go into too much depth in that game because I didn't watch the full game, and I thought I'd do a review of what I'll do is sort of do a wider review of the Rugby Championship, which just simply because we've had a bit more time to look at things, and but obviously it's taken a bit longer because I've had other things. Obviously there's things in life which I've had to deal with, so apologies for the delay, but I guess it's kind of giving me a time to think about what appeals, because lots of people have done standard reviews, done their teams, which I will do a team which I'll explain later because that's probably the funnest part. But I guess while I was thinking of my rugby championship team at the tournament for 2025, it kind of made me think about I had to think about how do we having you have Ardie Savea and Peter Steph du Toit. Well, I guess on the field they are playing they're similar positions, but who's actually people are saying New Zealanders have said Ardie Savea is set to win the World Rugby Player of the Year. South Africans will probably say Peter Steph du Toit. They would probably raise our Ardie Savea with Peter Steph du Toit. So look, I will maybe go into a little bit of that. I'm not going to go deep into it, but I thought I guess maybe raise some arguments based on the stats, and then I'll have my Rugby Championship team of the tournament. Well, one thing's for certain, like this 2025 Rugby Championship is it's certainly the best iteration of it. It's the best Rugby Championship we've ever had, certainly in terms of competitiveness. You had all four teams being able to win the title at some stage. Ultimately, it came down to New Zealand and South Africa, but even then, that was South Africa and New Zealand finished with the same number of points, with South Africa taking the title only because of their better points difference. And you would have seen the results that clearly that 43-10 thrashing they delivered to the All Blacks in Wellington was ultimately the key. And I did sort of mention this before. And look, South Africa deserved it. As an All Blacks fan, so South Africa deserved to win the Rugby Championship. It's second title in a row. They are the best team in world rugby right now. They certainly have the best depth. And I think even one could say South African rugby is perhaps currently an era which the All Blacks are in, sort of like mid. I think when we think that I'd say the 2011 to 2019. I guess we had a good team in the 2000 to 2010 that just didn't quite. Probably should have won that 2010 Rugby World Cup. I think you'd argue the 2011 to the 2018 All Blacks, that was certainly a really, really golden patch, certainly in the professional era. And I think South Africa are sort of well into that. Like, I guess like all good things, it will come to an end, or it feels like it. We don't know when that's going to end. There's certainly, as you'll see, there's certainly a lot of good players who are coming through. Age groups, the schools. South Africa is always going to have that edge in terms of population compared to New Zealand. And now with the coaches they've obviously there's Rassie Erasmus, but also I think another factor is that Tony Brown's coaching the backs. I think they are certainly going through a revolutionary period where they're not, I guess we're not just South Africa. The Springboks aren't just playing their usual brand of rugby which we sort of saw in Cape Town against Australia, where they just grind out results. They're now, we saw in Wellington, and we saw in Durban against Argentina. they have players more than capable of playing the sort of exciting, fast rugby, with lots of passes, counter attacks like the All Blacks have. And yeah, I think at some stage the All Blacks will catch up. I like to think they will. I still think that is talent this team. Whether I don't know. Look, you got even when Dan Carter and Richie McCaw burst onto the scene. New Zealand had won the Rugby World Cup for a good 13 years. And look, while they thought, yes, Richie and Dan were, considered, they were really elite players, there wasn't any indication that they were going to achieve the success they would eventually with, winning the Rugby World Cup in 2011, 2015, being part of that dominant All Blacks era. So I don't know whether, this generation, I guess Roy Gard is leading the way. I guess, players like Ardie, Bowden Barrett, they are sort of already kind of halfway through or towards the end of their careers. But, like your Ruben Loves, your Fabian Hollands, it's difficult. It's hard to know. We obviously have to see what happens. Circumstances will come into play. But yeah, certainly, it's certainly right now, South Africa are clearly the number one team in the world, and it's really up to the rest to catch up. And I guess that kind of plays into the argument. So you've got these two excellent players here, Ardie Savea, Pieter-Steph du Toit. Both can play all over the back row. Although I guess, and Ardie has started playing number 7 for the All Blacks with Wallace Satiti preferred at 8. Pieter-Steph du Toit and he wears number 7 in South Africa. Although you have to remember that traditionally, number 7 in South Africa, it doesn't necessarily mean the open side flanker. It might be right flanker or 6 is left flanker. But I think for all the purpose intent, you could, given his height, he sort of plays like the new traditional blind side flanker. And I think you have to see the Rugby Championship team when I try and make it. I try to make it based on the position they played the most in during the tournament. I just had to make exception for Pieter-Steph du Toit and Ardie Savea because, I mean, to be fair, you kind of you couldn't have it. There are no reasons to exclude both. Look at Ardie Savea. I think you have to think. Yeah, so I think South Africa, the South African forward pack clearly was superior. Clearly had, when certainly taking on the All Blacks, they clearly had the edge on the All Blacks for most of the time. And I guess maybe that. And for someone, when you're trying to, for someone, your ball carriers, that having the front foot ball certainly helps. And so I guess for someone like Pieter-Steph du Toit, Lewis, yes, he's still doing a lot of work, but it can sort of be shared out amongst his teammates. Obviously, he's got the captain side, Khaleesi. There's so many other great players around him. Whereas Ardie's really had to, and I'm not saying Scott Barrett's done less. It's just in a pack, as part of a pack that was always sort of on the back foot, Ardie Savea's had to go through a lot of work. And his tackling, his ability to carry, his attacking abilities, he sort of carried, of course, in Moana Pacifica, he sort of saw that he was really good with the ball, really good without the ball, really good tackling, with tackles and all that. And he just carried that on. I think you look at the Rugby Championship stats, which are quite high level, not quite as in depth as I might like, but it will work for this. Yes, I guess 16 defenders beaten, 76 tackles completed. Pieter-Steph du Toit, there's some metric, he didn't really feature defenders beaten and tackles completed, which is quite crazy thing about the tackles completed. But as again I said, he does have other players who can do the work. You can shout the workload. But one thing, because he's become a target in the lineouts, 11 lineouts won, which he's up there. I think up there with the likes of Fabian Holland, Matera, or it's the Argentine. 4 line breaks. So it's interesting. Ardie Savea didn't really have any line breaks, which is kind of surprising. But the two things that they have. I guess Ardie Savea 4 offloads, Steph du Toit 7 offloads, and 58 carries for Artie, 50 carries for Steph du Toit. So there was not a whole lot of difference between those. So it just shows you how important they are in terms of both how, when both teams have the ball and how they want to attack. So it's pretty even. And I think, what I've decided to do in this Rugby Championship team is have both of them, even though I know Du Toit's played the set in he's worn number 7, the same jersey as RD. I just felt you had to have both of them in there. So yeah, and look, I guess at least I think they're both even. Obviously I would like to see I think RD Savea had probably deserved it because be World Player of the Year, just simply because he's had to work behind an inexperienced a front pack that's not really had much dominance, but I mean, speed of Steph du Toit is certainly. I mean, he has almost exceeded a lot. Syracuse had so many good flankers, and my favorite personally is Scott Berger. I think, he thinks Du Toit's probably overtaken him now. So, I guess you obviously want to hear the Rugby Championship team of the tournament. I did try and put a graphic on ChatGPT with this team, but it is, I'll show it to you briefly, but as you can tell, it's not very good at all, so I'm going to leave that out. But for me, we start with the front rows. And look, before that, I should say, look, there are going to be a lot of South African players. I just think I think by and large their players have really stood out. You've got in the front row, you've got Ox and I'm sorry for the pronunciation there, and Thomas du Toit. They've been super consistent there. My props. And I think you look at the All Blacks, Lomax, De Groot, Williams, they've had injuries, so they really haven't had that time. For hooker, that was a bit of an interesting one. I was contemplating Montoya just simply because of the way he was an outstanding captain for Argentina and just the way he led. But you can't in fact ignore the fact that Malcolm Marx, who has been brilliant for so long, is the top try scorer in this Rugby Championship ahead of any back. So I'm just going to have to put him there. And look, Charlton, I mean, he did have one bad game against Australia, but it is quite an even. He's been solid elsewhere. And so, you've got to... and so I'm going to put Malcolm Marx as my hooker. Fabian Holland is one of my locks. He led the stats for most lineup takes. I think he might be competing with another person in this lineup for World Rugby Rookie of the Year. I think the way Fabian Holland's really come out this year has been really, really exciting. We've heard the story about, he's born in Holland, in the Netherlands, come out to New Zealand. He really wanted to play rugby, and I guess has really taken it to like a duck back, water of a duck's back. Whether he's in line with the next in line, you've had your Brodie Retallick, Sam Whitelocks. Only time will tell, but it's looking really good for Fabian Holland. And again, he's had an absolutely outstanding year for the All Blacks. The other lock, look, I know Scott Barrett's the captain. He's at 54 carries, but I don't necessarily think he was at his best. And this is probably, I'm going to be accused just for maybe reputation, but I'm just going to put Eben Etzebeth in there. I think he is clearly the best lock in World Rugby right now. Maybe, I guess he's up competing like some Maro Itoje. Nick Frost with Wallabies was really, really good, and he was second to Holland in terms of lineup ticks. But I'm just going to put Etzebeth in there. As I said, Peter Steph du Toit is my, I'm going to put a blind. This is the one area I'm going to break the rule. I know he hasn't won number 6, but Peter Steph du Toit would be my number 6, I guess, thinking. I just think you just really cannot leave him out, and I feel I'd have him there instead. I feel he would offer a lot more than his captain Cy Khaleesi. Cy Khaleesi is a really, really good player, but I just have Peter Steph du Toit there, and in effect you've got RD Savea at 7. You've got it's kind of like, well, You don't really need Saia Khaleesi in there. And then finally, and the other reason, of course, why you would need Saia Khaleesi, you got Harry Wilson, who Wallabies captain, really outstanding in that game in Johannesburg against South Africa. Really, actually, he's been outstanding the whole tournament. And certainly, I think the one real legacy is going for that win rather than taking the draw against Argentina and Townsville, knowing that yes, he was going to. They were wanting to push more, and it was absolutely the right call. And yeah, again, and brilliant in the lineouts, superb in the tackles. Really, absolutely inspirational player. Number 9, I've gone. Yeah, look, there have been a couple. Grant Williams, Cobus Reinach. Tate McDermott's been really good off the bench. I'm going to go with Cam Roigard. Now, this is a little bit controversial because he only played the last few games, but the way he came on, it really just sort of... the All Blacks backline was sort of transformed when he was there. He just really gave them such an attacking weapon around the fringes, and he's just head and shoulders clear of the next halfback, other halfbacks in New Zealand. And so, and I just wonder, I think if the All Blacks had Cam Roigard against South Africa, maybe, I just kind of feel they might things might have been a bit closer. They might not, certainly at Eden Park, I think we won, obviously, might have been more comfortable. I think he just gives us that extra weapon. No disrespect to like Cortez Ratama, Hotham, and Damien McKenzie, Carl Preston, but I think Roigard is just is the best halfback we've got in New Zealand rugby right now. Number 10, I've gone for Sasha Feinberg on Nongmezulu. Sorry for I just call him Sasha. Sorry for the pronunciation. I think he is the best number 10. He could be the best number 10. He could be he could be the next big talent, a bit, sort of level like Dan Carter. Santiago Carreras was the highest point scorer in the competition, but the way Sasha played against Argentina in Durban it's almost a bit like the way Carter played against the British and Irish Lions in 2005. It was just, South Africa might finally have a first 5, a playmaker who is not just good at kicking goals, but also is dynamic and able to play really, really exciting rugby. And look, I know, obviously, we've got Marnie Laborde had probably the game of his life against the All Blacks in Wellington, and you've got Andre Pollard, but I think Sasha's really the way to go for South Africa going forward, and I think he could be the best. He could very well be the best player in the world at some stage, which I know in rugby there are just different types of positions. It's a bit ridiculous, but I think if you were Sasha, depending how good, I think he'll develop under Tony Brown. I think Sasha could be an excellent, really has a good chance of being a future great. I mentioned Ethan Hooker earlier as one of the World Rugby Rookies of the Year. He was really impressive, I thought, playing out on the wing. He played on the blind side, number 11 wing. He just looked. He looked like he was pretty much set for international rugby. And on the other wing, Cheston Colby, I thought, clearly shows why he was the best winger in world rugby, even if he did have one of the locale moment of the Rugby Championship when he took a tap and kicked it straight to an Argentine player for a try in Durban. But look, other than that, he's been absolutely outstanding. So Cheston Colby takes the 14. Look, we've had there's been Leroy Carter, there's been a few other players, but I just think Colby, Colby. And of course, there's MPP as well. I just think Colby is, really needs to be in this team. In the centres, I've got, Damien Willemse. Look, I know he's not really, Damien de Lande is sort of kind of considered the first choice midfielder, number 12 for the Springboks. But the way he played against the All Blacks in Wellington was absolutely inspirational. And it just shows, South Africa just have amazing depth. And how on earth do you fit Damien de Lande, Damien Willemse, and Jesse Creel in that midfield? And I think Ethan Hooker could play centre in the future, although, that's still some time away. But, Damien Willemse for number 12. I know Geordie Barrett's had a really, really good Rugby Championship. He's been consistent as always. But, yeah, I think Willemse just takes it up for me. And finally, at outside center, the 13 jersey, Joshua Ali'i. I'm glad, by the way, I don't have to put a graphic because I still cannot spell his name correctly with where to put the apostrophes and all that. Yeah, look, I know obviously we've talked about Harry Wilson. I did talk about Nick Frost, Tate McDermott, and there's also, but I think, yeah, there's his teammate Ikata who's been good, but he plays 12, and I think Willemse needs to be at 12. I think Suali'i has really come up, really taken a huge step this season for Australia, and yeah, continued the form from the Lions. I think he's been the best 13 in the tournament, and really has become, I guess coming over from the league, I think he's probably the most important player in the Australian revival, along with Ikata. Just giving that backline that input, the solidity and creativity there. So he's my 13, and of course, finally, look, I was debating Will Jordan, putting Will Jordan in there. But ultimately, I've gone for one Cruz Malia, and I think if you look down at the stats, you can see why. He's got the most meters gained in the Rugby Championship, 337 meters, most offloads, 11. Yeah, I mean, Argentina's backs have been really good for some time now, and yeah, we've got another fullback here who's just absolutely outstanding. Certainly 29, certainly is playing in the peak of his career. So yeah, so I think that is my Rugby Championship team of the tournament, and that is I am going to close this chapter on the Rugby Championship of 2025 and start to look forward to the end of year tours to come. But what are your thoughts on the Rugby Championship? And of course, if you like this video, feel free to like, and don't forget to subscribe.
Chance.
Here's the cross kick. Peter Steph to Toit. Oh, did he get him early? Got it away anyway. Oh, sensational. Quagga Smith for the Springboks.
Well, we have to say, the All Blacks scored a pretty spectacular one in the first half.